This lesson, I'm going to give some background information on the Black Plague and how it contributed to a middle-class society. Okay, we finished Beowulf. In the Middle Ages, we have a class structure. It's very rigid. It's almost like a caste system. The king here is at the top. Below him are the lords, and also we have the religious figures there. You see them in the robe and the cane, reminiscent of Christ, who is the shepherd. And they give loyalty, military aid, and religious advice to the king. The next level down, we have knights. They are vassals to the lords. The lords are vassals to the king. So the knights give homage and military service to the lord, and in return, they receive food, protection, and shelter. And in the bottom level of this class structure, we have peasants, often called serfs. They farm the land that probably the knights own. They pay rent. They're usually the ones who are doing the manual labor. They're blacksmithing, and they're cooking, and they're making fences, and they're plowing the land. And in return, they receive food, protection, and shelter from the knights above them. Now, we call this structure the three estates. This will be on your exam, and I do expect you guys to be taking notes on every lecture and PowerPoint I upload. I put a lot of time and effort in there, and I want to make sure everybody's listening to me and taking notes. So we have a rising middle class after the Black Plague, and this class begins challenging these estates. And at this time, the monarchy and the church were very powerful. In this class structure pyramid, notice that the church heads the pyramid. It is above the monarch. So sometimes in the three estates, you'll see clergy listed first, and then nobility, and then the peasants. So here we have the church at the top, then the monarch, below him the nobles, the knights, the vassals, below them are the merchants, the farmers, and the craftsmen, and below them are the peasants and the serfs. As the Black Plague hits England, we'll start to see a lot of peasants and serfs moving up to merchants, farmers, and craftsmen. In the medieval ages, society was built around a feudal system. This was a political and social system in which a lord gave a fief to a vassal in exchange for military service. So this is a feudal community right here. At the top, you'll see the lord's manor. Often some servants would live in the manor. They would sleep there, either in the basement or the attic, and get up in early morning hours to start the meals, or get up in the middle of the night to serve the king, or not the king, excuse me, the lord or his lady. And then outside the walls, you have the church, and you have the farmers, and you have the serfs. And if you want to take a minute here and just read the little descriptions, and I'll also upload this PowerPoint into our online class, but you'll see the peasants here on the left. They grew vegetables in small gardens near their houses. That was the vegetables that they used to feed their families, but they're also in the field working as well, harvesting wheat. And then you have the village blacksmith, the sheep that fed. Now these sheep belong to the Lord, and so a serf cannot just go kill a sheep and eat it. Actually, they cannot kill a deer on the land. They can't kill a bird. They can't kill any animals on the land, because everything on the land belongs to the Lord of the manor. In the mid-14th century, the Black Death starts spreading through Europe, and it has disastrous social and economic effects. It killed approximately 1/3 of Europe. That's 75 million people. It was spread by rats, and the plague generally followed trade routes. The Black Death, and that would be, in this instance, the bubonic plague, which was a pandemic, reached England in June of 1348. Ultimately, 40 to 50% of England's population died, and there was a decline in trade, labor shortages, and food. So due to the Black Plague, disaster strikes. The estimated population of Europe from 1000 to the year 1352 is shown here. In the year 1000 we had 38 million, and it grows to 48, 59, 70, and then by 1347 we have 75 million people, and then the Black Plague hits and we go down to 50 million people. So 25 million people died in just under 5 years between 1347 and 1352. We have a decline in serfdom, and if you'll remember, that's an agricultural laborer bound under the feudal system to work on the feudal lord's estate. Look to the right there at the top, you'll see a picture of 2 men thrashing wheat. Those men would be serfs. So due to the Black Plague, it devastated 1/2 of the population of Europe. The reason you're seeing different totals and different estimates is because there were many plagues. They would go away, come back, go away, come back. So now I didn't list them all for you, but you can look it up on the internet. It spread most rapidly in cities where people lived in close contact with each other. The wealthy, however, had the money and the means to escape. They would leave London. They had horses, they had carriages, and they had summer houses. So they were able to avoid a lot of the death rates that the lower classes did. So what happens whenever a Black Plague knocks out your workforce? Well, those peasants and serfs living out on the feudal land suddenly have great job opportunities, and they excuse me, they travel to London and they fill the void, and they command a premium price for their shoes and their bread and their ironworks, their glass blowing, or whatever jobs they take. So there's really a benefit for the peasants due to the Black Plague. Increased employment options, higher wages. Society became more mobile as peasants moved to accept work where they could command a good wage. The king, however, attempted to prohibit the working class from price gouging, but they were unsuccessful. I mean, the king could say you can't raise prices, and then they're still going to do it on the side. And if you're desperate for bread and there's not a lot of bread makers and you've got money, you know, you'll pay. So there's a little joke here on the right. I don't know, I thought that would be funny. Lady Gertrude explains how she gets her laundry so clean. I use Surf. Now, there's a laundry detergent that was called Surf, so that's the joke. I'd like you to consider what happens when an illiterate peasant moves to London and becomes a shoemaker, a blacksmith, a dressmaker, or a baker, or what have you. What do you think is going to happen? They're making good money, they get married, they have children. What else would they do? They hire tutors. They make sure that their children can read and they can write. And when you can read and write, you have power. This is a very important aspect of British history and our own history. So we see a rise of a middle class, whereas before we had an upper class and we had the peasantry, the lower class. Now we start to get a class in between. These children are first-generation merchants. They're literate, they're educated, they go to college. Remember, the merchants they're getting a premium wage for their work because there's a lack of people to fill the jobs, and whenever that happens, then the price of the work goes up. So they're reining in the money, and they send their kids to college, and they become stewards and accountants and physicians and attorneys. So a steward would be a man who is hired by a lord of an estate, and he manages the estate. He keeps all the account books. He pays all the workers. He pays all the merchants. He keeps up with the staff, and he knows everything that's going on. A lot of times the Lord won't even be in his manor very much, so the steward would be the one running the manor. The point is that these children of these merchants, they rise above their parents' station in life. And we start to see this middle class, and we see this reflected in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales.